Welcome back to my channel. It's a continuation from the video of how to cut this full maxi Ankara circle skirt. Today I'll be showing us how to sew it together. Let's get started. So it's now time to show us the sewing tutorial of the maxi skirts we cut out in the last video. Here is our maxi skirts fabric that we cut out. I also went ahead to cut a lining for it. Note that the lining was cut with the same technique, but of course the lining is cut to be shorter. It's far shorter. So the length of my lining is 22 inches. By the time I finish hemming it and then also using the waist allowance, it will come to 20 inches. If you do not want to line your own skirts, it's absolutely fine. It's optional. So this is the lining fabric. I've also gone ahead to cut my band fabric. This band measures 5 inches by 39 inches. Remember, this waist we were working with was 38, but I've added 1 inch to it to finish off the edges of the band on both sides. And I've also added fusible interfacing to give the band a little bit of structure. So we'll start sewing. Now it's time to start sewing our skirt together. And the very first thing I did was to get the initial small piece we cut out to make up the length of the skirt and then attach it to the bigger piece of skirt fabric. Here I am using my selvage as a guide. Remember, we overlapped the fabric by about 3/4 inches while we were cutting out, and this is the 3/4 inches I'm sewing out now to just make the length of the skirt long enough as required. That's me trying to align the skirt layers together, and then I'm stitching it together to make up the full length of skirt, cutting out the excess thread. Now that's my full skirt piece all in one piece now. Now I've picked up my lining that I cut out, and I'm going to first of all be tidying off the edges of my lining by creating a double fold and stitching on it as I go along. This might be a bit tricky because of the curved edge of the circle skirt. Please do take your time and ensure that you do this as neatly as possible. As an alternative, you can serge this if you prefer, or you can use a bias binding to finish it off if that is your preference. But in this case, I double fold the edge of my lining fabric and stitching it down as I go along. Now I'm done stitching it and cutting off all my excess thread. It's time to join both the Ankara fabric and the lining together, ensuring that I'm facing right sides to each other. I'm facing the right side of the lining to the right side of my Ankara. Now I am matching up the edges, and I'm going to be stitching that down as well. Stitching it down, the edges, both the Ankara and lining. I've just stitched out one side, and I'm going to be repeating the same process for the second side. That's the second side now, stitching the lining to the skirt fabric, right sides facing each other. Please, if you are new here, don't forget to like, don't forget to share, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. Now I'm done stitching the edges together, and then I'm turning it right side out. That's now the skirt is on the right side and the lining is also on the right side. I'm going ahead to pick up my band fabric that I cut out. Remember, I cut it as 39 inches by 5 inches, though we are working with a 38 inches waist inclusive of our zipper allowance. So yes, I will be attaching my band from the lining side. First of all, from the lining side. Remember, we added a 1-inch sewing allowance to this skirt band because we'll be using that 1/2 inch on both sides to finish off the band. And yes, I am leaving that 1/2 inch on this side as I start sewing. I'm then going along as I stitch the band to the skirt, starting from the lining side, stitching it on a straight line and ensuring that both the band, the lining and the skirts align with each other as I stitch along on a 0.5-inch seam allowance. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, don't forget to share, and don't forget to subscribe. If it's your first time here, please don't forget to look at my previous videos. I dropped a video on how to cut this circle skirt, and then this is the continuation of how to stitch it. I also dropped a previous video sometime last week on how to differentiate between a 360 degrees flares and how to cut them out accurately. If you haven't seen that as well, please don't forget to check the video out. You can find the link to that video in the description box below. Please don't forget to subscribe. You just need to click the red button showing below. When you click the red button, don't also forget to press the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I drop a video. Now I have finished attaching the band on a straight line, and then I'm trying to finish off the edge of the band facing right side to right side on a 0.5-inch seam allowance we left initially. I've done that on this side now, and then I'm cutting off the excess thread and snipping off the corner, repeating the same process on the second side, matching the right side of the band to each other and stitching on a 0.5-inch seam allowance. Snipping off excess thread and cutting off the corner. Now I'm going to be turning the band right side out, making sure that I poke out that corner and ensuring that it's pointy, nothing is stuck on the inside. Now it's time to finish off our band, and then I'm pinning down my 0.5-inch seam allowance on top of my Ankara fabric using the previous stitch line from the lining as a guide as I go along. I'm using that stitch line, and then I'm ensuring that this band lays on that stitch line so that it would be accurate as I go along. Please feel free to use your pins. It helps you and saves you a whole lot of headache of going back and forth on these processes. Now I am stitching down my band and taking off my pins as I go along. That's me stitching off my band now as carefully as possible, because this is going to be showing on the right side of the skirt and you don't want it looking wobbly. You want it looking as presentable, as professional, as neat as possible. So that's me sewing on the skirt band as I go along, sewing close to the edge of the band as much as possible, but ensuring that I do not skip any spaces or jump any part on the band. And I'm taking off my pins as I go along. Taking off my pins as I go along. I'm now cutting off my excess thread. I actually noticed that there was a little skip on a little part of the skirt band, and then I went back to just stitch that bit down. Cut this thread now. I have my skirts and lining piece looking beautiful, all clean, both sides looking neat and all clean. taking off the remaining pins that I still have on the garment and tucking it away on my pin cushion. Meanwhile, that pin cushion was handmade by me. If you would like to see a video tutorial on how to make it, please comment below and then I could show us how to make the pin cushion. Now I'm facing the right side together, right sides of the skirts, and poking out the corner and making sure that it comes out. Now I need to measure my skirt band. Remember, we are working with waist, so quickly I took the measurements, which give me 18 times 2 is 36, and then I'm going to be marking that point with a chalk so that I would know where to start attaching my zipper allowance from. I then went ahead to pin that in place. I'm measuring 7 inches downwards from that point to serve as my zipper point. That's where I'll be attaching my zipper allowance, and then I'm closing the rest of the skirt from that point all the way to the bottom. I'll be closing that off before I attach my zipper. Remember, it depends on the allowance that you left initially when you were cutting out your skirt. I left a 1-inch seam allowance, and that's what I'll be sewing with. I'll be sewing on a 1-inch seam allowance from my zipper point all the way down the length of the skirt. If you're still here, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like, and don't forget to share. If by any means you try this out, please don't forget to share with us on our Facebook group, Xpleesit Collections, or on our Instagram page, Xpleesit Collections. We'll be looking forward to see your finished work. So I went on sewing on a 1-inch seam allowance all the way to the bottom of the skirt. Backstitched and then cut out my excess thread. That is my zipper allowance. I did it at 7 inches. You could make yours longer if you prefer. Now it's time to hem the base of the skirt, and then I'm opening the seam allowance up, double folding on a 0.5-inch seam allowance and stitching down the entire circle. I'm stitching down the entire circle skirt. You have to be careful in this process as well. Like I said, with the lining, because it's a curve, it's delicate, so we have to be careful as we go along. If you prefer, you could serge it, you could weave the edge and